Well, suppose it's time for one more martini. No Time to Die. What will be supposedly, I say supposedly, I'm pretty confident in this one, but we've also heard this before, the last outing of Daniel Craig as James Bond 007. That was supposedly the case for Spectre, but they did bring him back for one more. I really do think he's probably done this time, though. So, this trailer dropped, and I'll admit I was initially kind of a little annoyed because trailers, like, they're dropping at a rate that I usually don't see outside of, like, around a major Comic-Con. I'm like, will you just stop? I need a break. But, yeah, I do want to talk about this one. So, it looks really good. And I said, I mean, visually. I mean, it looks great. The shots are great. The stunts look great. It looks very practical. I'm sure there's some CGI enhancement, but what I've always appreciated about the Daniel Craig era of James Bond is they actually doing all the stunts, which is one of the really good things about this era of James Bond. I mean, there's one of the good things about James Bond as a franchise in general, but it has had its times where it didn't do it as well or as much, but that they've really nailed that. And Craig looks, I was worried that he was going to look asleep or uninvested, knowing how very firmly he said he would not do another after Spectre. I think something along the lines of, I would rather break this glass and slit my wrists. So I did kind of worry that him coming back for one more after being so vehemently against the idea that he was going to give a performance that made it clear he was just here for the paycheck. But it doesn't look like that. It looks like he is invested, putting in the effort, putting in the work, which is good. The stunts look good. It looks fun. He's got the banter going. Little moment he has with Q. Jeffrey Wright's back as Felix Leiter. Down for that. And yeah, there's a lot that I can see this and go, that looks cool. Problem is, there was a lot in the lead up to Spectre that looked cool. And there was a lot even in the film that looked cool. It was still a garbage fire of a movie. I didn't like it at the time I saw it. It has soured for me over time. Whatever there was I had nice to say about it, there isn't much left. And at this point, the Daniel Craig era is super inconsistent. When they're good, they're great. When they're good, we get Casino Royale, which I actually think is slightly overrated, but is still really good. And we get Skyfall, which I love. But then we also get Quantum of Solace, which we seem to have collectively as a culture just decided we're going to pretend never happened. And then there's Spectre, which, unfortunately, I can't pretend it didn't happen because it's tying in very directly with this one on a number of levels. And that's another thing that makes me nervous, aside from the precedent, because if I were a more superstitious person and tried to adopt something similar to the supposed Star Trek film thing where only the even numbers were good, and it seemed like of the Daniel Craig era, only the odd numbers were good. The first one was good, the third one was good. Oh, maybe the fifth one will be good, except, like I said, it's tying in directly to Spectre, and Spectre was not good. And as much as I'll admit you shouldn't like throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of elements like Blofeld, certainly especially. He's a big enough part of the history of this franchise that, and Christoph Waltz is a good enough actor that you don't completely give up on that. But just even having the connection, and because his performance was fine, but I hated how they did Blofeld. Like, from a writing narrative perspective, motivation for him especially, I hated it so much. So, I'm not thrilled at the idea of them bringing Blofeld back and doing anything with that. What throws me off a lot more, though, makes me a lot more worried, is they're bringing back the love interest usually seems like a strong term to use with James Bond, but they're bringing back the girl he ended up with at the end of Spectre, and it looks like she's driving a lot of the plot and like her secrets, and they're at least how the trailer's cut, which asterisks and allowance can always be deceptive. A trailer can always be cut to imply things that are not in fact the case, or make it look like this might be what's going on, but that's not really it. Editing can change absolutely everything, so I'm allowing for that, but also realize I can only judge what I've seen. What I've seen is the trailer. I'm going to take it at face value until I have a reason to not do that. So they're making it look like he's really connected with this woman. There's a couple of lines and like reaction shots or whatever that make it seem like he's really hung up on her. Like he really sunk his heart into her. I don't like that. I'm not going to say you can't do that with Bond, but they did it with this Bond. They did it with Vesper Lynd back in Casino Royale. And it made a lot of sense there because that was this Bond starting out. And it really kind of sets the groundwork for him to be the Bond we're a little bit more familiar with, who doesn't get super emotionally invested. He can get angry, but he doesn't give his heart away, because we got to see in Casino Royale how badly it went for him the one time he did that. So the idea of having him, get there again, the thing is, like, if these stories, if Bond as a franchise was about a character journey and an arc for James Bond as a character, then it wouldn't bother me. I'd be like, oh, look at that. He's healed enough that he's willing to get with another person and put his heart out there again. But that's not what James Bond is. James Bond suffers when it's more about the man than his work. It should be about what he does and how cool he is doing it. When you try and make it too much about the character and his inner workings or his personal journey, honestly, you kind of lose the thread a little bit about what's great about Bond. You can still make it personal. Skyfall pulled that off. And the tail end of Casino Royale pulled that off. But they also went too far with Quantum of Solace, with basically his entire thing being a revenge motivation, which is a weird motivation for a guy it's literally his job to kill people. You don't have to give him a revenge motivation in order to set him on the path to kill a lot of people. That wasn't the only problem with that movie. That was just a badly put together film with a half-baked script. And then we get to Spectre, and they try and make it more about him and his history and his connections with Blofeld, which were dumb. So I like it when somebody can get under Bond's skin a little bit. It's actually one of the reasons I consider The World Is Not Enough to be kind of underrated. But when there's a difference between having a character kind of get to him on a personal level and having the film depend on being invested in him as a character with a journey, as opposed to a character who's just cool and awesome and we get to enjoy this. So that worries me, because I think in general Bond films suffer when they're more about him as a character than about how cool and awesome it is to just see what he does. So that's another reason for me to worry. And I don't know if they know what Bond is anymore. The thing is, as much as there have been great entries in the Daniel Craig era of Bond, it really does seem like they reinvented almost film for film. Casino Royale is actually kind of a weird hybrid in some ways, but you can see the impact of things like, say, the Jason Bourne films in things like the fight choreography. And that was taken to a further extreme with Quantum of Solace, because they tried to do the handheld and the heavy cutting, but they failed very badly at it. I mean, I would argue Paul Greengrass barely is able to pull that off, and that movie absolutely wasn't. And then Skyfall became a little bit more meta and a little bit more legacy sort of thing, which is, was kind of becoming more of a thing at that time as, things like superheroes were becoming bigger. And a lot of those stories are about are about legacy and leaving in what we leave behind and things like that. So that sort of again fit into what was the modern milieu. I don't know why I decided to actually try and say that word with the French pronunciation. I probably butchered it. But anyways, and then we get to Spectre, where they tried, I think they didn't know what modern thing to ape with Spectre. And so they tried to bring back a bunch of elements from classic without understanding why they worked at the time that they did. And then they're just in there like a checklist and they don't function worth a dang at all with the really horrible, stupid, at this point, very cliche, I am the architect of all your pain, stupid friggin' twist with Blofeld, which is dumb and I hate it. It's not even new, but it's been very popular lately in the last decade or so with some of these big franchises, be they on TV or film, and I hate it. I'll always hate that. But I don't think you can say that there's a uniform feel to the Daniel Craig era. There's a feel to his Bond. His portrayal is consistent. I mean the films as a whole. And so that leaves me in a position where I don't really know what to expect of this. Because say what you will about the other eras of James Bond, whether you like them or don't, they have a consistent flavor to them. They have a consistent feel to them. Even if they end up at, in an end of a spectrum where it doesn't work anymore, which ultimately happened with pretty much all of them sooner or later. As much as I will defend most of the Pierce Brosnan movies, they did get sillier and sillier and sillier as they went on. Just to the point that, yeah, Die Another Day was ridiculous and in a way that wasn't quite working anymore, but it did still feel organically of the same era. The feel of all the Craig films is very, very different. Which means I look at this trailer and go, that looks cool, but I don't know what to expect from this thing. I still intend to see it because when Bond films are good, they're really good. And in a way that it's actually hard to find in other franchises. But I feel like hitting the sweet spot has really become a moving target in recent years. And the severe unevenness of this franchise, I'm going to be nervous. And honestly, no matter what the trailer is, even if the trailer didn't have some of the elements and things and indicators that had me worried, even if the trailer looked amazing on every level and I had nothing to complain about what I saw in the trailer, I would still be nervous just given the track record of this franchise, with Craig in the role. And again, the unevenness, not his fault, but it's still the Daniel Craig era, so his name gets slapped on it. Apologies to the man. But that's James Bond. No Time to Die. The trailer. What'd you think about the trailer? Are you excited for the movie? Was the trailer enough to get you excited? Are you a massive cynical jackass like me and you're still nervous even though the trailer was honestly pretty good? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Stuff to do as well. I have a Patreon. That is greatly, immensely appreciated if you're able to support me on that. Failing that, like, subscribe, share this video. That helps me out as well, and it appeases the algorithm. Other stuff to do as well. Links below for merch and my social media and my P.O. box is down there. Holidays are coming up if you feel like sending me something. I don't know why people do, but they do. I appreciate it. But whatever, you also don't have to do any of it because at the end of the day, you're the council and I'm just running the meeting. So until next time, this council is adjourned.